right. Okay. You ready? All right. The time has come for us to commence. You think we're ready, Julie?
Yeah.
Go. All right. Well, welcome one and all to the Ogden-Layton Area Technical Advisory Committee for the Regional Growth Committee, excuse me. Today is Wednesday, February 16th, and we're thankful you're all here, friends, neighbors, visitors, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Spencer Brunley, I'm the chair, and we need to do some approval of the December 15th minutes. So has everybody had a chance to review those? And if so, can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
Well, that sounds like my meeting last night. Move to approve.
Okay, do we have a second there?
I will second that.
All right, so we got Steve Parkinson with the motion and Brad McElrath with the second. I'm going to do like we did last time. If there's anybody opposed to approving the minutes, please speak up. Otherwise, we'll consider your silence and approval. And there it is. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate that. Our next,
wait, should we do a roll call?
Yes, I always forget. That's why.
So I'm going to go through each of the communities on this technical advisory committee, but I'm also going to drop in the chat a Google Doc that we're going to test something out new here, that if you could go on that Google Doc and also add your name to that list, just to make sure that we have everyone. But in the meantime, we'll also do a verbal roll call. So I'll just start alphabetically. Bountiful. If you're here from one of these organizations, just unmute and say hi. Bountiful. Box Elder County. Brigham City.
We're here.
Okay, hi Paul. Centerville.
Here.
Hi Kevin. Clearfield is Spencer, Brad, and Tyson.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, Clinton. Hi Peter. Davis County.
Hi there, this is Chanel Flores.
Farmington, I see Shannon is here. Far West. Fruit Heights. Harrisville. Hooper. This is also a test with whether I can say everyone's city's name correct. This is nerve-wracking. Kaysville. I think that was the only tricky one. Kaysville. So Layton, we have Elizabeth. Merritt, Slaterville.
This is Joy. I'm also here from Layton.
This is Brendan from Layton City too.
Okay, hey guys. Maida.
This is Ariana. I'm with Maida.
North Ogden. North Salt Lake City.
Mackenzie Bennett with North Salt Lake, and Allie Avery and Sherry Pace should be joining momentarily.
Perfect. And we also have one of your council members here.
I know, I got to act right.
The one and only Ted Knowlton has been promoted to council member, if you guys didn't know. Ogden.
Here.
Hi, Barton. Perry. Plain City. Pleasant View. Dana, thank you for coming. Riverdale. Roy.
Here.
Our one and only first person to actually say you read the meeting minutes. Thank you, Steve. South Ogden. South Weber. Sunset, Syracuse, Uinta, Washington Terrace. Okay, Weaver County, thanks Gary and Ashley for joining today. And all the West Bountiful, West Haven, West Point, speed things up.
West Haven's here.
West Haven, yep.
Willard and Woods Cross.
Woods Cross is here.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Sam. And then UDOT, UTA, FHWA.
Christopher Chestnut with UDOT.
Carrie Doan, UTA.
Eldon Bingham with UDOT.
Okay, and then on WFRC side, it looks like there's me, Julie, at the long range planning team, Michaela with our TLC team, Hugh and Nikki with also our long range planning team, Miranda, our legislative manager, I forgot what the other word was, Ted, our deputy director, and then Megan, our director of community economic development, Rosie, our administrative assistant, and Burt, our analytics lead, and Marcia, our economic development planner. And then I think Lauren should also be on the call. So I think that's it from our side.
Michaela, did you say Michaela?
I did.
Okay, sorry.
So thanks, Spencer. Now back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Julie. Appreciate it. So again, if you are here and you missed your opportunity to speak up, go ahead and put that in the chat. Did you want it in that Google Doc, Julie, or just in the chat itself?
The Google Doc would be fine, but I think maybe some people joined. So let me re-add that. There you go. Thank you.
Perfecto. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody, for being here today. We appreciate your time and willingness to meet with us. Still meeting virtually, and so we'll see how long that lasts. But our first item on our agenda following the first item, so item number 2, is our legislative update, and Miranda Jones-Cox is going to take a few minutes and talk to us about that.
Perfect, thanks. And thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. I'm just gonna give a brief update on what's happening in the legislative session right now. I'm sure several of you are aware or engaged to a certain extent, but wanna provide a little insight as to where WFRC is at in the legislative process as far as helping push for certain funding appropriations or what bills we're watching, and just keeping everyone in the loop on that. So I'll kind of first start out with talking about legislative appropriations. So as of right now, the legislative appropriation subcommittees have already met and have been able to prioritize funding for the various requests that the legislature has received for funding items. Those prioritized lists go to the Executive Appropriations Committee and the EAC. The EAC then gets to ultimately decide what is funded, and that is based off of what revenue is available when they finalize revenue estimates near the end of this month. And so within the coming weeks, and there is only about 12 working days left of legislative session. So we're hitting, I know, lots of cheering, we're hitting the home stretch. But EAC will start making the final recommendations, and then we'll see those recommendations in their priorities and ultimately in a funding bill. Specific appropriations that WFRC is advocating for or watching and tracking is kind of two-pronged. So the first is multimodal transportation investment. So active transportation, transit, and roadway funding. Specifically with active transportation, there is a request for $46 million from UDOT for regionally important active transportation projects. This builds off of the $35 million in AT funding that the legislature appropriated last year. And this $46 million would be in addition to that. With that specific appropriation at WFRC, and similar to an effort we did last year, we're putting together a letter of support for active transportation funding investments. And everyone has the opportunity to sign their name onto this letter and also express their support. And so Hugh, if you wouldn't mind dropping that in the chat for folks. And if you all haven't either gotten the opportunity to sign it yet or would still like to, please do so. This week we'll be sending that to Executive Appropriation Committee members as well as other members in the legislature to ask for their support on that. So active transportation, there's also transit investments. So specifically an item that we had recommended or requested was to replace the bonding on front runner. So last year the legislature appropriated $232 million for the front runner double tracking project, but that was in bonding authority. And so the request was to replace that bonding with cash, and luckily that was already successful and has already been funded. This kind of was funded prior to a lot of these other funding decisions. And so the legislature, in essence, put another $232 million in cash into front runner, which saves the state money in interest costs, as well as allows the transportation investment fund to be used for other transit projects throughout the state. And so, of course, we'd love to see even more investment into transit this session, but we're really pleased to have seen that been funded. And then third is more funding for roadways. There's not a specific dollar amount that we're looking for with this, but we're anticipating that the state will likely put substantial additional funding into roadway projects to accelerate projects as they've been prioritized by the Transportation Commission. Last year, Representative Mike Schultz did a big kind of omnibus transportation spending bill of nearly $1 billion. I don't know that maybe we'll see that much, maybe we won't. But regardless, I think there still is the intent there from the legislature to put funding for multimodal transportation this year. And so as we hear more and kind of see those final numbers come out, we'll be sure to keep everyone apprised with our legislative wrap up. Second, and just to finish up funding requests and items is requests for funding for technical assistance and planning for growth. So there's $1.65 million request in for additional technical planning assistance. Some of that would go to UDOT for their technical assistance program, and then the rest would go to the state's 7 associations of government for our technical assistance programs and to expand the capacity that we have to help you and your community. So technical assistance, think like TLC program that some of your communities may have been recipients of projects before. And then lastly, there's $1 million requested for a statewide conversation on growth. This would go through the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget to help understand, the concerns of Utah residents of growth, and also help educate the public and elected officials on growth and how planning for this growth is one of the ways that we can address it. So that's appropriations. And again, feel free to weigh in or ask questions if anyone has them. I'm happy to answer, but I'll just kind of hit briefly, lastly, on some key legislative bills that you can keep an eye on. Well, there's a lot out there, and of course we don't have time to go through all of them, but I would just recommend, if you are curious, to check out our WFRC bill tracker. I'll link to that here once I'm done. But the bill tracker shows WFRC's positions and summaries of various bills that cover all the areas that we track: air quality, land use, transportation, housing affordability. So feel free to keep an eye on that. But just real quick, one bill that WFRC has been instrumental in with several of our other partners is SB 140, which is the HTRZ or Housing and Transit Reinvestment Zone amendments. For those unfamiliar with the tool, HTRZ was passed last year in SB 217 and would allow tax increment capture around front runner stations, a third of a mile around front runner stations, and would, use that tax increment to help address affordable housing issues in those areas. So it's kind of a development tool of sorts to be used for these transit-oriented development areas. This bill would do a limited expansion of HTRZ and would allow it now at not just front runner stations, but also at tracks and BRT stations with a cap of the total number of HTRZs, which can be proposed and then approved in any given county. And that's Senator Wayne Harper, his bill. Another one to keep it, or just to watch or to be aware of is HB 322. This is by Representative Christopherson, and this bill would require further coordination between the Utah Department of Transportation and the Utah Transit Authority for transit capital development projects. So specifically, the bill outlines double tracking of front runner and the point of the mountain area transit. And the reason why this bill, and our understanding of the reason why this bill is being brought forward to increase that coordination between the two entities is because the state is continuing to put financial investment into these transit projects. And so the state kind of wants to be more involved in the process, wants some more oversight in the process. And so being able to bring both organizations together to accomplish the goals of the state as far as those capital projects go. UDOT and UTA have both been great in the process and have assured the legislature as well as us that they will work together in coordination, and we're just really pleased with how they've decided to move forward with this piece of legislation. So that's one to keep in mind. And then there's a few more bills that are yet to come. The big LUDMA, or Land Use Development Management Act bill, is still set to come out, I think, in the coming week or so. Housing affordability bill from Representative Steve Waldrop, which would make changes to SB 34, or the Moderate Income Housing Plan bill, which was passed a few years ago. And then an additional bill from Representative Waldrop, which would require station area planning around transit stations. And so those are ones to just keep an eye on. Those will hopefully be coming online soon because we're all running out of time quickly. But that's kind of the brief update. And so if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I'll drop the bill summary for the HTRZ bill, the bill for the transit bill, and then our bill tracker in the chat as well, so that everyone has that handy. But if anyone ever has any questions or wants to subscribe to our government affairs email to get more information about all this, please feel free to let me know. Spencer, I'll turn it back to you, unless anyone has anything.
Thank you, Miranda. That was a great update. Appreciate that. Yeoman service up there on the Hill. This is a fun time up there on the Capitol, so we appreciate those of you willing to brave all of that funness and let us know how it's going. So thank you. Any questions for Miranda or anything anybody has? Feel free to throw it in the chat if it pops in your head a little later. Gratefully, we have that there for that opportunity. So thank you again, Miranda. All right, item number 3 is a discussion about the 2023-2050 RTP from the Long Range Planning Group. And I don't know who's leading the charge on that, but I'll turn it over to Julie.
Okay, yeah, we will all have something to say here. Yeah, so we want to provide you a quick update on the development of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan, and in particular discuss both the comments that we received on our draft preferred scenario and how projects have changed and then discuss our proposed needs-based project phasing criteria. So feel free to stop. I have a brief introduction, and then we will review those comments and projects. So feel free to stop us at any time if you have questions or comments or want to discuss anything. So I'll just give a brief overview of Wasatch Choice as a reminder. This is our region's blueprint that aligns for the future, aligning transportation, land use, and economic development strategies. It's developed collaboratively with our local communities based on the 10 regional goals that the council adopted a few years ago. The transportation element of that vision is our regional transportation plan. And so this plan includes active transportation, roads, and transit, and aligns it with land use. Just a reminder, we update it every 4 years. So we're about to adopt a new plan next year, next May. We financially constrain the projects that are in the plan, and then the plan has to conform to air quality standards. It's a reminder of why it's so integral that your projects and your needs are reflected in this plan, is that many of our transportation funding sources, whether that's our state transportation dollars, our federal transportation dollars, some corridor preservation funds, and some local option sales taxes, require projects to be in the RTP. And so right now, so a few years ago in 2020, when we really started kicking off the plan, we spent a lot of time exploring the uncertainty of the future, looking at how new technologies and policies could impact our travel demand, our mode choice. And we've discussed that here with you in the past. And then last year, we spent a lot of time focusing on scenarios and how those uncertainties might play out in project demand, and identifying projects to include in the 2023 draft plan. At the end of last year, we had a series of workshops with our local cities and counties, reviewing those projects and getting feedback from you. And we've continued to have discussions with other stakeholders, large landowners, the transportation agencies. And so we're working now to refine the projects that are in the plan, whether it's the extent, the type of mode on transit, for instance. And then we'll spend the rest of the year assessing our financial considerations, trying to figure out how much expected revenue we'll have over the next 30 years, phasing projects based on need, and then financially constraining them. And we're exploring policies that can help support the plan through our regional growth committee. And then, like I said, we'll adopt the plan next May, in May of 2023. So I'm going to turn it over to Nikki and Lauren and Hugh. Sorry, I didn't forget your names. It's been a long day. To kind of go over each one of the modes that are in the plan and show you the differences between the 2019 plan and things that have changed to the 2023 plan.
Thanks, Julie. I'm going to drop a link into the chat, which is a comparison map of the 2019 Regional Transportation Plan with the 2023 draft that Matthew Silsky at our office had developed for us, and it's a really awesome tool. And I'm also going to share my screen, so bear with me. Can everybody see the map on here? Okay, cool. So yeah, just this map shows all the modes. If you see on the top, has roadway, transit, active transportation, and we also have all these comments or new adjustments, just to keep in mind, came from the fall workshops that happened last fall. We received over 600 comments or so. We've done also additional outreach for clarification on some of the comments that we received from the workshops with many of you. When you're looking at this map of the Wasatch Front, just keep in mind that we also have taken off projects that are going to be constructed by 2023 or will begin the construction by early 2023. So they're taken off the plan. And then we also do that if there's projects that have been partially constructed. So you might see some of the extents adjusted or removed on the project based off of the comments that we received from you all, the new aerials that we've gotten from this last fall, and it should reflect what components should be the remaining pieces that are yet to be built. So I'll just walk through some of the major roadway adjustments that we have, especially on the northern part of the region and west, Davis County, Weber, and Box Elder area. For Box Elder, we don't have a whole lot of new changes. We added a new connectivity project up here. We still have this extension on like I-15 frontage road, but there's actually some additional conversations on whether we want to keep that due to the geographic constraints. As far as in northern Weber or like Weber County goes, you'll see that in far west, we've actually removed this State Route 126 realignment and actually just added an interchange upgrade to look at that realignment. We've also adjusted, if you click on the projects, you'll actually see more information about the project type in here. And we've also adjusted West Weber, West Davis corridor to reflect the sections that are being built. So you'll actually see that parts of West Davis corridor and also Highway 89 is completely removed since it's being constructed right now, like I mentioned. There's some new connectivity projects that are being added in Layton. We have a new road project, Arsenal Road right here, kind of like in that MIDA area. It came out of the Falcon Hill master plan. It'll be a new road project. We have a few more, widening, new construction and operational improvement. Everything that's in orange is like an operational type of improvement on the plan. So you'll see that there's some new additions in Farmington, and let me think of anything else. That's kind of, there's not a whole lot of changes, but I just want to make sure that we're accurately capturing what your comments have been in the last 6 months. And as you take a look through the different modes, and Lauren and Hugh will walk through the transit and active transportation here shortly. Let us know if you see anything that we're missing that we should be including on the regional transportation plan. And we're hoping we can wrap up, comments or additional adjustments in the next couple weeks or so. So that kind of concludes all the major changes, I would say, for the region on the northern part. So does anybody have any questions? If not, I'll hand it off to Lauren here to walk through some of the transit projects.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we'll kind of start up north. So for this area, we have corridor preservation, and we've kind of extended that. But quickly, on the previous plan, you'll see there was this blue line, which was an express bus. So for the RTP, we are changing the express buses, and those will now be considered and reevaluated in UTA's long-range transit plan. So the express buses on this current plan, you will see have disappeared on the RTP, but they still exist and they will be reevaluated with UTA's LRTP. And we see down in Weber, you can see the Ogden-Weber State BRT project is not on the current one, but that is because it is under construction. So we have taken that off, and the coinciding transit hub. We also, the Ogden to Pleasant View commuter rail and the coinciding Ogden BDO station have come off following the outcome of the Box Elder Cache and Weber transit study. So this project, we have kept the corridor preservation on that. And then we have a few core routes have been realigned. to hit some key centers. We have one going from Clearfield through the Hill Air Force Base up into the Roy Station. Have a couple that we've changed in North Ogden to kind of hit areas in there, and then go down to other town centers in Washington Terrace. And then from there, let's see, we've got the Davis SLC Community Connector. So that is this kind of red line here that has been changed. The mode and the alignment have been updated from conversations with cities and UTA and UDOT. So that is no longer a BRT and is now a core route, and that services further north than terminating here.
I don't think that's true. I think it actually still is a BRT. They redefined a BRT so that it didn't have to have dedicated lane. That was the last meeting I was in with them.
Okay.
So we should double check that, please.
Yeah. Yeah, because the BRT definition that we have for the RTP is over 50% dedicated lanes. So I will follow up with you after this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention. It's exactly what this is for. So if there are any other questions, those are kind of the main changes for this area. If there are any questions or comments. Okay, well, I will hand it off to Hugh to talk about the AT project list.
Thank you, Lauren and Nikki. I won't go over every project change that happened, but just to reiterate what Nikki said, tried to make a lot of adjustments for projects that had been partially completed or that will be under construction by the adoption of the plan, and made several changes based on recently adopted or finished active transportation plans in the areas. And we know there are many or some that are ongoing now. And so we'll work with those communities to get things updated when those come online. But just to give you an idea of some of the changes that have been made, again, feel free to explore this as you can. Adding bike facility crossing with this roadway project here in far west, 3300 north, down here in Roy, in their general plan. Rocky Mountain Power Corridor been identified. We've put on here the 3-gate trail that many of you are familiar with, looking at an extension from the current terminus here actually into Ogden and getting over the railroad tracks there. And in Washington Terrace and Riverdale area, this connection road and crossing over the railroad tracks there, another example. In Davis County, changing the project type on Antelope Drive from a bike lane to a shared use path. And some of that work is underway, not for the whole thing. Also looking at the Rocky Mountain Corridor, Power Corridor Trail through Layton, the Davis and Weber Canal. We were a little bit short on that, so extending that project. And West Bountiful down here. This is the Mill Creek 400 North shared use path. It used to bend to the north in this area, and based on some feedback from West Bountiful, extending that straight over to the Legacy Parkway. And then in North Salt Lake, upgrading the Parkview pathway where it doesn't exist and expanding it where it does exist to accommodate two-way bicycle traffic. So those are just some examples of the changes we made. Again, many others, smaller extents or removing projects that should be built or have been built. But looking forward to any additional feedback you may have on this. We'll say, I'm not sure if you mentioned it earlier, Nikki, a question was asked in our previous meeting, as we move into phasing, when are we looking to get final feedback on this? And in the next 2 weeks, and then we really got to be moving on. So hopefully you have a chance to do that, and just let us know whatever additional changes might be needed in any of these modes. Thanks.
Okay, so one last thing about the plan. We're beginning to do needs-based phasing. And so Needs-based phasing is our process for prioritizing projects based on when they're needed without thinking about when funding is available. And so we began the process of reviewing our needs-based phasing, taking the criteria we used to phase the 2019 plan, and then working to align that better to state and WFRC federal transportation funding evaluation criteria. So that would be TIF, TTIF, the TIP. And then we've also been coordinating with our transportation partners like UDOT and UTA on this criteria, and we presented it to the Regional Growth Committee and the Active Transportation Committee for feedback. So today we wanted to have a discussion with you about what we're proposing the frameworks for roadway transit and active transportation. So I'm going to share my screen, but encourage you to get into this link I'm about to share with you. It's another concept board. Some of you are in it. I can see Brad and Dana and Tyson and Spencer, so thanks. But the reason I want you to go in there as well as me sharing it is that we're asking you to vote on some of your priorities. So we would love your feedback. And the only way you can provide us your feedback is by going into the concept board. So at the top of the concept board, you'll see our 10 Wasatch Choice goals, as well as our federal performance measures. And the federal performance measures, WFRC is required to work with UDOT and UTA to set targets and monitor our performance against a set of goals. And the regional transportation plan needs to help the region move towards those targets. So all of the goals you'll see below, we've tried as best as possible to tie need and criteria to these goals and performance measures listed at the top. So this may be a lot to take in at once, which is why you'll see at the bottom of the board area for discussion and feedback as you think about these things while we're talking or after the project or after this meeting or through the rest of the week or even next week. Feel free to get back into the concept board and leave us your feedback here. To leave a comment, if you're at the top, you'll see this comment button. And if you click on that, you can just click anywhere on the board and just say like, hi, or whatever your comment is. And when you save it, it will have your name. And that way I can follow up with you if there's anything I need to clarify. So I'll just walk through each one of the frameworks, roadway, transit, and active transportation. Again, this is an open discussion. So if there's something that feels off about one of these measures, or you think that we're missing something, or you think that there's a good data set out there, just chime in and let us know. In the meantime, as we walk through them, you can vote on using these buttons here. You have 3 votes. And so really just give us your top 3 priorities when it comes to the phasing criteria that we're using. I'll start by noting that for roadway and transit, as we have been working through TIF and TTIF prioritization, one of the questions we, because both of those funding sources are tied to the needed phase, both the financial constraint and the needed phase in our plan, one of the questions we've been getting is really like, how do you define needs? And so we've taken a step back in this planning cycle, tried to define our needs-based phasing criteria through a more narrow lens. And then when we're going to talk about financial constraint and which projects should get funded first, we have these additional financial constraint considerations at the bottom. So I'll just walk you through on the road side. What that means is when we're talking about needs, we're really looking at whether projects improving safety, improving access to opportunities, so improving access to jobs, whether it's enhancing freight mobility, reducing delay or increasing connectivity, improving our state of good repair, so our asset management on bridges and pavement, or the project is ready to go because it's either completed or has an underway environmental study. And so that's how we're broadly defining our needs. And then other criteria, which may be familiar to you because we've used it in the past, things like it's providing multimodal options to our equity focus areas. The project has an active transportation facility on it, or is compatible with a transit route, or improved access to our Wasatch Choice centers, or is in your local plans. Those things are things that we would consider when we're trying to make funding decisions. If, we have so many needs and we can't fund them all in, say, phase 1 or phase 2, and so which projects should get that priority funding. So does anyone have any questions on how we are proposing that framework for the roads? Are we missing anything? Are we considering something you don't feel is important? Anything like that you want to discuss now? Okay. I'll move on to transit, but feel free to come back on the road side. So on transit, how we're defining needs is through connections to things like people and jobs. So that would be the activity density. This is population and employment around transit stations, access to existing amenities like healthcare, schools, grocery stores, things that you need to get to. And then looking at access opportunities, so jobs, both from a regional perspective, that's the first one, and then from that equity lens. Of course, we also need to look at ridership. So we're looking at both existing and projected ridership. And then we are looking at traffic congestion on the corridor or adjacent corridors as a way of saying areas that are heavily congested could benefit greatly from transit being able to more efficiently moving people through an area. And then when we're looking at that financial constraint, considering things like, has there been a completed corridor study or corridor preservation is already happening, as well as how well connected and accessible is the station. So that's that walk network connectivity score. Any first thoughts, about the way we're approaching that transit framework? Okay. Again, just when we're done, you can go back to the roads and transit as well, or add it to the bottom. And then for active transportation, because active transportation has a little bit different, we don't really need to financially constrain it per our federal regulations. We don't have that same needs-based phasing and financial constraint framework with roads and transit. But here we still do phase, and this plan will be the first time that we'll financially constrain those active transportation projects. And so when we're looking at priorities here, we're looking at whether we're reducing user stress. So that level of traffic stress really looks at the type of roadway that the facility would be on, and then the type of separation that the facility has. The latent bicycle demand is looking at where people are either currently using or would it be expected to use an active transportation facility, dependent on a number of variables like land use and densities, et cetera. Also looking at the ability for the region and our equity focused areas to participate in the economy by connections to jobs. Looking at if these active transportation facilities are connecting to population centers like the Wasatch Choice Vision Centers, whether they're improving health outcomes. So right now we're looking at the UDO Health Improvement Index, but we're talking with UDO about whether there's another data set that we should be using there. And then of course, looking at connections to both transit and shared mobility services like bike share and micromobility. As bike share gets expanded in the region and scooters and the like also get expanded, really providing safe bicycle facilities for those users who may be slightly less familiar with the rules of the road or bicycle safety. And then finally, and this is obviously in no particular order, but the last thing we're looking at there is whether we're improving the bicycle network connectivity and building on our previous investments by expanding that network to a greater amount of people. So those are the three draft frameworks. And I see yay, that makes me happy. Oh wait, never mind. Neither one of those are legitimate comments. All right, I was about to get super excited that you guys had comments here. But yeah, like I said, I would love to have a discussion with you now if you feel like something's amiss in this framework. You can even tell us that you support it and you think it's absolutely perfect, and thank you for doing it and I deserve a raise, or you can come back and leave discussion and feedback after the meeting is over. So on that note, I'll just assume it's perfect, and Sherry, send it over back to you, Spencer.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks to your team there. That a lot of good information, and again, just as a reminder, watch those emails as they come out. I know the link for this platform was provided prior to the meeting, and there was encouragement for everybody to jump on. And I know for me, as I looked at it, it was helpful to hear Julie and the team talk about these things with the context of already being aware of what was sent out. So thank you to your team, to you.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing. I'm planning on just leaving it open like this for the next few days. So if by the end of the week or early next week, you could get in and let us know your priorities and give us any additional feedback, that would be fantastic.
Sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts before we move on? Again, that chat feature is a blessed thing. So maybe you're not thinking about it right now, or maybe you're playing Candy Crush while we were all talking and now you're paying attention again. So whatever works. But feel free to throw your comments in there if something comes to mind, so we can have those relative to that discussion. So thanks again, Julie, for you and your team and all that you provided. So item
Good
number
luck in
4.
Candy Crush.
Item number 4 is a discussion on upcoming first last mile. And I think, Hugh, is that you and Russ Fox, or is it just you?
It might just be me today.
Okay.
Thanks, Spencer.
Lucky us. All right.
That's right. So moving on a little bit from the long range planning that Julie and team just covered, want to talk a little bit more about implementation. And by raise of hands, who was a part of or familiar with the Tiger Grant Award of $20 million from a few years back? You can raise physically or virtually, as Ted has done. All right, a handful of people, great. For those that aren't familiar, I'm going to play a short 2-minute video just to refamiliarize you or introduce you to this concept, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what the efforts are today. So if this doesn't come through with sound, please let me know, but here we go.
The Utah Transit Authority is excited for the opportunities that have been granted to the state of Utah by the U.S. Department of Transportation, Office of the Secretary, through the allotment of the Tiger Grant. The vision of these projects began over 7 years ago with multi-agency collaboration, including UTA, the Utah Department of Transportation, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and the Mountain Land Association of Governments. It was culminated the past 3 years through the application process and the official signing of the Tiger Grant on February 8, 2018 by the U.S. Department of Transportation and UTA. This allows UTA to move forward, making the vision a reality. UTA has leveraged this generous grant of $20 million with matching funds and has received commitments in excess of $75.7 million. These funds will be applied towards the UTA Tiger Grant First and Last Mile Connections Project. The project will improve safe active transportation access for the users to UTA's commuter and light rail stations. It provides community access to regional opportunities, projects of regional importance, facilitating the individual end users' access to public transportation. Projects span over 80 miles north and south from Provo to Ogden and approximately 50 miles east to west from Tooele to Summit County. This is a massive regional project comprised of smaller projects on the local level. We've joined efforts with 26 cities and 6 counties that we consider our local partners. They're all vested financially in our unified vision to improve the regional transportation experience from the first mile to the last mile. The uniqueness of this undertaking is that the projects are for the local entity. Much of the cost and responsibility of the continued maintenance will be done by the local municipalities. The Tiger Grant has allowed us to immediately deliver local, safe transportation projects to the community. Approved through the Tiger Grant are 161 projects installing and improving ADA ramps, bike lanes, racks and lockers, bike stations and repair stands, bicycle share stations, bus stops, shelters, crosswalks, pedestrian bridges, railroad crossings, sidewalks, multi-use paths, lighting, and resources to assist in wayfinding. These.
Okay, thanks for paying attention to that. And so you can see that was a huge lift by a number of entities, collaboration across all of the partners, local governments, transportation agencies. And many of those 161 projects are now complete and built. There's a handful of stragglers that are still making their way through. But the question now is, so what's next? Where are we going? And what's the second effort at trying to do this? You may have picked up on the video that this first effort was definitely focused on rail, both commuter and light rail. And there's a thought that this next effort focuses a little bit more on bus connectivity, right? Or access to bus stops and stations. And so presenting this for you today, there's a small working group that's been put together to think about this a little bit. And with all of the IIJA programs that are coming out, the new federal infrastructure bill programs, being prepared for all of these opportunities. So want to get you to start thinking about what types of projects your community might be interested in. If any of you are interested in being up to date on what the working group's up to, please let me know. You can do it in the chat or an email. And the hope is that we can have a good solid list of projects by the fall to help prepare for a potential, any potential 2023 grant opportunities. And the Tiger grant is no longer called Tiger, it's called RAISE, R-A-I-S-E. And so looking forward to that opportunity and any others. So again, just wanted to introduce you, remind folks that may be involved before about what this effort was. And again, hoping to collaborate amongst agencies and municipalities and counties on this going forward. I see a hand raised. I'm not sure if that was for the Tiger question earlier there at Pleasant View, or if it's a question, but happy to take questions if there are any.
Sorry, that was from earlier. I need to unraise my hand.
No worries. Ted, were you going to add something?
Yeah, thanks, Hugh. So, Hugh, you yourself just went over the active transportation component of the regional transportation plan. And one of the challenges with implementing that plan is that the funding package is not as clear cut as it is for roads and transit. And so if you're looking at one of those projects as a community and you're thinking, well, golly, it sure would be great if we could get that funded, the link is this first last mile 2 is one of those potential answers. So if one of those or more of those projects look really good to you, especially those that relate to high capacity transit stations, then there's a linkage between those two components.
This is Joy. Is there a list already available that you guys have compiled?
Yeah, great question, Mayor. Thanks for that. And so the last effort, there was 161 projects funded between the Tiger grant and matching funds. But there were many, many more projects that were initially put together as first last mile projects, but weren't as part of the grant award. So we have that existing list, and a lot of that maybe has been built already through other means. And then there's been talk about using the nomination list that UDOT has received for the Transit Transportation Investment Fund first last mile application. But otherwise, we're really just trying to start this, I don't want to say totally afresh, but anything that's on a city's radar. So if you're interested in an existing list, we're working on compiling, sort of a starting point and can get that out to you, but I don't have it at the moment.
So we can go ahead and add to this list now then, right? Even though it might be on a prior list? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hugh, I was just going to ask, that working group is an internal working group to WFRC, or is that made up of multiple agencies, or just so I understand who it is that this committee is?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks for it. Right now, it's a working group with WFRC staff, MAG staff, our assistant MPO to the south, UDOT, and UTA.
Okay. Maybe you said that earlier and I just missed it with my Candy Crush, so I want to make sure I got it. Thank you.
That's a good question. Thanks.
Hey Hugh, on this type of grant opportunity, can it be combined, because it's a federal grant, can it be combined with any other like state or other federal grants, or is it you can only use it this way? Because I'm thinking like trying to leverage other sources to be able to pay for something.
Yeah, it's a great question, Brad. So the RAISE grant, except for in certain circumstances, is an 80% funding match. So 20% has to be non-federal. Can be state, can be local, but not other federal funds, as I understand it.
Thank you.
So it's definitely not the last opportunity to be involved here. You know, if there's something that you're thinking about right now, let's start talking, but we'll definitely be back to chat more with you about this. And even if you can't think of a specific project in your community, maybe somebody from any of those agencies thinks of one and brings it back to you and says, you know, would you like to support this? It's on our radar. And so we'll have all of those conversations forthcoming.
Hugh, one last question. When do you want, this is Joellen, when do you want the list of, you know, potential projects to you? Like what's our timeline?
Yeah, thanks, Joellen. We don't have a definitive one right now. We're just kind of getting started. So we're just sort of kicking the dirt up and getting it in the air, so to speak. I anticipate we'd want a final project list by the fall because these grant opportunities, they're a really, really big lift once you have projects identified to get a package put together and get it submitted, and anticipate that being in the spring of 23. But there might be other opportunities as well besides the RAISE grant that would be good. So, you know, if you're thinking of stuff, give it to us as soon as you can, give it to me. But you know, I don't think it's too late until the fall or winter or something like that, but more to come. Sorry, I'm not more definitive on that.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. Appreciate that. Great questions, great conversation, and we'll proceed on. We're tracking well on our time, so we appreciate everybody's participation. And next on the agenda is Mr. Burt Granberg to discuss housing unit inventory. So Burt, are you ready to rumble? There we go.
I think so. If you can see my screen and hear me. Got the A-OK. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that we're finishing up in the analytics group at WFRC. And that is specifically something that we're calling the housing unit inventory. It's a data set, but it also has an interactive map that we're calling the Housing Inventory Explorer. And this is what the web map looks like. And before I go into that, just talk a little bit. Oh, okay, here we are. So we do a lot of work with the assessors data in WFRC counties, and our counterparts down in Utah County Mountain Land Association of Government, that's the same. And we combine that into an urban region land use model input data set, right? As we're trying to forecast where development is going to go, both residential and job locations, out through 2050. We've got to have really good information for what the current conditions are. And one of the coolest things stats that I heard when I first started at WFRC was some work that Envision Utah did, and they quantified the percentage of new development that was happening in Salt Lake County within a half a mile of tracks and commuter rail stations. And I was like, that always just resonated with me. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but it was a substantial portion, especially in Salt Lake City. And I was like, as we prepare our next base year for a real estate market model, we've got to have current conditions. And I was like, if we just do maybe 10 or 15% extra work on this, we can have a really good regional resource that describes sort of the current residential housing stock, and also using some of the really rich data in the assessors database, some of the recent trends that are happening up and down the Wasatch Front, and And then another goal was to be able to do it so you could query that, that housing inventory by whatever area you wanted to, a neighborhood, specific cities, groups of cities, that kind of thing. So, you know, we've done the work and we've published the first version of this housing unit inventory in web map format. As soon as we get the data from Mountain Land for the Utah County area, we'll publish it as a data set with the state GIS office, UGRC. I think we'll probably have that in the next week or two, if I'm reading the tea leaves right. But you know, the work entailed starting with each county assessor's parcel data from January 1, 2020, which, as you all know, has great information about lot size and square feet and valuation, property class, what year the primary property was built. But what it doesn't have is, in all cases, doesn't have good information about unit counts for apartments, especially, and condos and other like homeowner association owned properties like are kind of represented in strange ways. And so those are the two main things that we attacked in trying to add value to the assessor's parcel data set, which is already a tremendous resource. So we did three main things. One is like we grouped common area land together with the units for condos and some PUDs. So here's a before and after example of what it looked like in the parcel data set, and then what it looks like grouped, so you get a better idea of land use intensity. These are all duplexes and 108 units in that big polygon where we put everything together. Apartments, another example. Not all the assessors carry a unit count for apartments. Some just carry a range, like, you know, they're more than 10, which doesn't tell you a whole lot of detail when, you know, some of these bigger units have hundreds of units. And, you know, we've got to translate that all into households and locate households up and down the Wasatch Front. So we used aerial photography, we used address points for 911, and we put together as best we could an apartment unit count for the apartments in the assessor's data. And then the third value add is just standardizing the data set across county boundaries so that we're giving ourselves as good a chance to look at apples and apples across the county boundaries. So having done this, we're able to pull some really interesting stats. Like this is looking at the new units added in each of the last 40 plus years by type. And you can see some trends here. Single family, you know, it's no wonder the prices are going up. We're not adding as many units as we had in the past. And townhomes are becoming a bigger part of the mix, and apartments as well across the region. You know, we can also look at the trends by county, and you can see that you know, your mileage may vary depending on what county or city you're in. And we can look at trends in density. For example, dwelling units per acre across the region has been on a big rise since, you know, basically about when I moved here in 1990, which I don't think I had anything to do with it, but we're moving toward more intense land use across the board. You look at that in this data set across counties, you can see that Salt Lake County is leading the league in terms of the density increases, but everyone's seen a decent amount of variation over time and a little bit of an increase as of recently.
Hey, Burt, can I just jump in? Quick interjection. I wonder how many of you, as you're looking at this, you're thinking, gosh, you know, this might be helpful in our moderate income housing plan work, or, you know, or more generally in our general plan. But I think that's part of, it's those kinds of tie-ins that that are the reason why we wanted to bring this to you. And Burt, you might have said that, but
No, I didn't. That's a great addition. I'm going to add that to my script. This slide just illustrates that you can pull any area you want in terms of the analysis area. We just drew a rectangle to illustrate that. And, you know, you look at maps of land use, and in this case, attached multifamily units occupy 5% of the residential land. I'm sorry, 5% of the total land in the bounding box, but that's 41% of the locations. The colored areas are 41% of the locations that people call home. So if you're looking at land use maps, particularly for residential, it's really, this data set hopefully puts things in maybe a broader context. I'm gonna skip.
Burt, we got a question in the chat from Paul in Brigham City, if Brigham City, Perry, and Willard could be added to this analysis.
So they can. We haven't done it yet. We'd love to add that portion of the area to it. We've got to work with the assessor. I believe it's, gentleman's name is Rod. So we've got to get a little bit more detailed information from them to add them, but that's definitely our intent.
Rod Bennett.
Rod Bennett, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So just so.
And then we have another comment from Shannon in Farmington. I'm just asking if this data will be available for us to examine our individual municipalities' data and get back to you.
Yes, we put this we put a link to the web map and introduced it in our January newsletter. We've got a map of the month feature, and that's how we wrote it up. But we immediately got a couple pieces of feedback and are making some edits in Ogden in some of the mixed use properties in downtown. So, this isn't perfect, but our feeling is it's good enough that people will use it, and hopefully if they see things that need attending to, that they'll let us know, and we can sort of follow that adage of data that gets used gets better.
And then Burt, do you have a link that we can add in the chat to the data or the?
Yes,
perfect.
I just added it. So here's a percentage by city of single family versus attached and multifamily. There's lots of stuff we can do with it, but getting back to the web map to finish, the web map has a lot of these sort of basic queries, and whatever area you're looking at in the map window, the charts will automatically update for that geographic area. So I've got more or less Davis and Weaver County shown here, and we can look at a unit count, housing unit count. We can look at the built by decade chart, look at single family versus attached and multifamily, the density for each of these, the amount of land that they take up, the valuation and square footage. And then you can go in on this sort of like expandable panel on the right side. You can create your own filter. So I can go in, for example, and look at everything in the last 20 years. And the picture is going to change, the charts are going to change. And you can also look within a specific city and it will filter to the city's boundaries. Or you can turn on buffers and it will filter the results to 1/3 of a mile within track station, 1/2 mile of front runner, or 1 mile of freeway exit. So there's a lot more you can do with the raw data. We'll definitely make an announcement when that's been published and ready for folks to work with and on their own GIS and other analysis platforms. But mostly just wanted to introduce this to folks, and if you end up using it and have feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you.
How does the 1/3 mile of tracks and 1/2 mile front run relate to the HTRZs? Or is that I guess what I'm asking is if the HTRZ is within 1/3 of a mile front runner and 1/4 of a mile of tracks, then should we adjust that so that if people are thinking about HTRZs, they can more easily see what would be in that project area?
So yeah, right now this web interface that we built this in is going to limit. You can look at one or the other. If you look at them both, you're going to see the areas that have the intersection of a tracks and a light rail and a commuter front runner buffer. And we don't really have an easy way to fix that. So that's a good example of if you want to do a custom analysis, then grab the data and GIS analyst and dig in. Okay. Well, back to you, Spencer.
Burt, I'm going to use a technical term. That was super cool. Super cool indeed. That's amazing to have that much data just at our fingertips, and bravo to you and your team and WFRC for all the work on that, because I can only imagine that was something you did over the weekend, just, you know, real quick and easy, right? Just hammered it out. So that's awesome.
Yeah, if you ever run into Josh Reynolds in our office, he did the lion's share of the work, and building on the amazing data that the assessors keep. I think we've got to give them a lion's share of the credit too.
And so I was going to say, it's amazing what you can get accomplished when you put down Candy Crush.
It's true. It's true. I can't even find my phone at this point, so I am being so productive right now. So Burt, thank you again. That was great information. And again, if you have a question or something you want to share, please use the chat. We're going to move on to our next item of business. And that is Michaela's going to talk to us about public assets and public health initiative in Megan's stead. So Michaela, we're going to turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen here. All right, can you all see it? I see some nods. Awesome. Yeah, so today in talking about public assets for public health, the main takeaway is that there are some new resources available for you all to do planning work around public assets and public health, and we want you to know about them, as well as brainstorm with us about, you know, the best uses for those resources. So we're really excited to announce that Intermountain Healthcare selected WFRC as a recipient of a new $500,000 donation. The Utah League of Cities and Towns is also receiving a donation. And the donation has two primary objectives. First, it will support efforts to improve public health through the way our cities and region are planned, including transportation planning. Second, it will also support more thoughtful utilization of the myriad land and building assets that various governmental entities own and operate. The donation will be paid in 2 annual installments of $250,000 beginning this year. So specifics for the use of these funds are currently being developed and will be determined in consultation with Intermountain Healthcare, ULCT, and of course, our member cities and counties. And we really want to highlight that whatever direction is determined for the use of these funds, we want it to be really relevant and helpful to you all. So I'm going to provide just a little bit of background. I'm sure a lot of you do this type of planning work, but just to make sure everyone in the room is on the same page. We really believe that the use of these funds can help advance our shared Wasatch Choice vision, which includes the goal of livable and healthy communities, and that the Wasatch Choice Growth Centers are an excellent place to focus these resources and especially explore improved utilization of public assets. This graphic shows how public health is strongly influenced by the built and natural environments. In fact, zip codes can influence health outcomes more than genetics, which I think is a really powerful thing to note. Public assets can include school districts, public alleys, utilities, parks, public gardens, trails, really any public lands and built environment facilities that are owned by government entities. And these assets can positively affect public health and well-being. For example, if there's a food desert, but there's, you know, an alleyway that isn't being utilized, then maybe it can be converted into a public food source by, you know, planting a community garden there. This graphic illustrates the relationship between physical health and well-being in the built environment, and it shows that the way that we use public assets can really impact well-being as well. For example, if you look at the statistic in the upper right-hand corner, the The number of children who are physically active outside is 84% higher when schoolyards are kept open for public play. And then there's also equity implications because the absence of public assets can impact public well-being as well. For example, if you look at the statistic in the center part of the screen in the bottom, teens who live in poor, mostly minority neighborhoods are 50% less likely to have a recreational facility near home. Of course, that has physical and mental health implications and also social health implications. So as we saw on the last slide, how public assets are utilized has public health implications, and there might be room to analyze how well public assets are utilized. One thing that I think is really interesting, if you look at these two pictures of the before and after of a schoolyard, you can see at first it's all pavement, and then a nonprofit came in, partnered with the school, and they worked with the students even in the curriculum to create this really activated and child-oriented space. And part of the nonprofit's requirement of the school district for coming in was having them do a joint use agreement with their local jurisdiction to open up this space and increase its utilization as a public asset, so everyone in the community could now access it. And in this particular place, that was really important because there was no park or open space within walking distance, but now residents can use this area. And that's just one example of the many different public assets that there are and the different ways that they could be utilized.
Hey, Michaela, can I just, sorry to interrupt, but I noticed on some of your pictures here, there are power line corridors. And I think that's pretty cool that several of the communities on the call today pointed out to us of plans they had, for trails underneath existing, power corridors that are quite extensive in this area of our region. So kudos to everybody that's already thinking about this.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've been, we're still developing ideas about funding specifics. That may include coordinating the use of these funds with other funding sources in WFRC programs, including but not limited to the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program. And there are definitely a lot of different regional and local planning applications. So we brainstormed some here, and these are really what we want to hear more from you all about today. Some local planning applications could include complete street policies or green infrastructure plans. It could also look like added elements to the general plan that deal more specifically with the intersection of health and planning. Really, whatever you're working on with a public health or public asset angle. Yeah, so to help us brainstorm the best way to put these funds to work in the region and around the state, we wanted to ask you all these questions. What regional data or guidance is missing in this realm? Are there any things that your city needs? What has your city done that others might find helpful? So I'll turn this over to you all. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Michaela, one thing that I'd add, I think that you said this at the front end, but if you're a community and you're working on a plan right now, and you might ask yourself, well, does it make sense to augment that plan to look at one more thing, namely public health or the use of public assets? That it's not a brand new, lots of overhead additional planning process. It could just be adding one piece of scope to something that you're doing right now. And the idea here is we pay for it. So it might be an interesting thing, low risk, possibly high reward kind of thing to explore. And that's part of the reason why we're bringing this to you, even though it's not fully baked. This is like before the first commercial break in the Julia Child's cooking show.
Any comments before I turn it back to Spencer?
We're giving them plenty of time, Michaela, plenty of time at this point. Okay, and I apologize. I did not introduce Michaela appropriately with the let's get ready to rumble. I had a request to do that with every introduction from here on out. So I'll try to remember that going forward to be as disruptive as possible. But Michaela, thank you. Thank you for that discussion. Thank you for that insight. I think that's a good point that we're talking about assets that already exist. We already pay for them. They're already there. How can we better utilize them to benefit our residents, our communities, and just make good use of those things. So thank you for that presentation. Our last item on the agenda is any other business that needs to come up or needs to discuss or thoughts from the group. I want to first thank everybody for being here today. Those of you who maybe this is your first time or you were hesitant to join in a meeting that I was the chair of, I appreciate you joining in today and being a part of it. But any other thoughts, any other business, any other items you'd like to discuss at future meetings that we can prep and bring forward at our next meeting in April? So next few minutes are yours. This is a participation part, everybody. So
any cheat codes for Candy Crush?
Or Wordle? I guess not, Julie. I guess not. We'll just have to win it on our own. Thanks, Michaela. Yeah, please reach out to the presenters today too if there's any thoughts or insights or additional feedback you have. Helping Hugh with the list and just in general to make sure we share information and data and continue to build kind of our resources as a community, as a region, and as a state. I think there's great value as this group gathers here in Ogden-Layton area. So no other business, nothing else to discuss. Ted, anything from you? I saw you're unmuted and I always appreciate the things that you say. So I want to make sure I didn't pass that over. Okay.
Well, thanks for the opening, but no, nice to see you all.
Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for being here again today. We appreciate everybody's time and know that it's valuable and hope you don't feel like it's wasted, but appreciate you joining us today. So with that, we'll bid you adieu and give you thanks and hope you have a good rest of your week. Signing off.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Rosie, thank you.